dive. Today we're tackling something pretty fascinating, a question. Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something pretty fascinating, a question right where art, math, and AI meet. Ever wondered how algorithms can seemingly think their way into creating really complex, sophisticated art? So our mission today is to give you a kind of deep dive shortcut into this pretty mind-bending fusion of emergent algorithms and set theory. We want to uncover how these huge, complex soundscapes can actually grow from, well, surprisingly simple math rules. Hopefully we'll hit some of those aha moments you're looking for. Now, at the heart of all this is set theory. Okay, yes, it's a branch of mathematical logic. But for composers, it actually becomes this incredibly powerful, structural language. It lets them define collections, sets of musical things, pitches, rhythms, dynamics, you name it, and organize them with a precision that, traditional harmony just doesn't offer.
Exactly. And what's really surprising, I think, is that this abstract math isn't just for looking back at the music. It's the hidden architecture used to actually generate the sound. We're not just counting notes here. We're talking about defining the relationships between groups of notes, these sets, and using those relationships to build complex musical ideas from the ground up. We'll break down exactly how this math leads to auditory creativity. And maybe we should start with its history, because it's not entirely new.
Yeah, let's do that. Because this whole structural approach, it wasn't born in a computer lab, right? This kind of mathematical logic, specifically what's called pitch class set theory, really took hold. It became, well, pretty dominant intellectually in post-tonal Western art music back in the 20th century.
And the seeds were really planted by the Second Viennese School, Schoenberg, Berg, Webern. They really paved the way with the 12-tone technique, which was revolutionary at the time. It basically forced composers to treat all 12 chromatic pitches as a single symmetrical set. They called it the aggregate. No single note was more important than any other.
Right, the aggregate.
And this rigorous ordering of everything, pitch, duration, dynamics, that's what we now call serialism.
It was a really deliberate break from centuries of harmony, wasn't it? That whole system of keys and chords. But turning that philosophical idea into a really rigorous standard method, well, someone needed to actually write the textbook, so to speak.
That's exactly right. And that's where a couple of key pioneers come into the picture. First, there was Milton Babbitt. He was the one who really rigorously applied mathematical principles, very much including set theory, directly to serialism. He used these set operations to define, well, pretty much every single relationship and transformation between groups of pitches. Very precise.
Yeah, demanding feels like the right word there. I mean, it was Babbitt's work that famously got criticized as being music just for computers, right? Which is pretty ironic, given what we're talking about today.
It is quite ironic, yes. It was absolutely music driven by logic. Then, the second key figure, and maybe the most crucial for actually standardizing things, was Alan Forte. His book, The Structure of Atonal Music, back in '73. That was the real game changer. It basically standardized all the terminology, the methodology for analyzing this non-tonal music using set theory. It finally gave composers and analysts, too, a common, rigorous language to even talk about these complex pitch structures.
Okay, right. Let's unpack that a bit more then. Let's move from the history to the actual mechanics. We need to get a handle on the basic building blocks to really understand the logic here. And it seems like it all starts with the simplest unit, the pitch class or PC.
Exactly. Think of a pitch class or PC as just the name of a note, but it doesn't matter which octave it's in. It's like mapping the notes onto a clock face, 0 to 11. So all the C notes, high C, low C, middle C, they're all pitch class 0. C sharp or D flat is 1, D is 2, and so on right up to B, which is 11. It just collapses all the possible frequencies down into these 12 distinct units we can work with mathematically.
Okay, so 12 basic building blocks. And from those pitch classes, we build the collections, the sets. So we take a simple example everyone knows, the C major chord. Mathematically, that's the set 047.
That's exactly right. 047. 0 for C, 4 for E, 7 for G. But you see, if we only looked at sets like that, we'd quickly end up with, well, potentially millions of different collections. It actually sound pretty similar because they're just, shifted up or down or maybe mirrored. And that's why the concept of the prime form is so important. It's crucial.
Ah, okay. Prime form. What does that do?
The prime form is basically the standardized version for every possible set of pitch classes. It reduces any collection down to its most compact, fundamental representation, packed towards the 0, you could say. This lets us immediately see if two sets are actually related through transposition or inversion, even if they look different on the surface.
So it reveals this kind of hidden structural coherence.
Precisely. It finds the specific version, either transposed or inverted, that bunches the notes closest together, starting from the lowest possible number, usually 0. It gives each fundamental structure a unique signature.
Okay, so it's like a structural cheat sheet for the analyst.
Yeah.
But how does this standardization not just lead to music that sounds, well, the same or monotonous? If everything boils down mathematically to just a few core structures, where's the variety for the listener?
The variety comes from what you do with those sets. It comes from the transformations. Composers use really simple mathematical operations to constantly change the sound, the surface, while still keeping that underlying structural connection. You've got transposition T, that's just shifting the whole set up or down by a fixed interval. Easy enough.
Right, like moving a chord up 3 semitones.
Exactly. Then you have inversion, I. That's like mirroring the intervals of the set.
Yeah.
If you went up by 4, now you go down by 4 relative to some axis. And then there's also retrograde R, which is often linked with serialism specifically. That's just playing the pitches in reverse order. These simple rules, applied to the sets, can generate a huge amount of different material, almost infinite permutations, while still being logically connected.
Right, so we've got the basic language, sets, pitch classes, and these static operations, transposition, inversion, retrograde, TI, and R. Now, here's the really interesting part for me. How do we get from these static mathematical chords or sets to a dynamic, evolving soundscape using algorithms? That's the emergent part, right?
That's exactly it. This is where we shift gears from just analyzing music with set theory to actually synthesizing it, creating it. The power here really lies in this idea of emergence. An emergent algorithm starts with very simple local rules defined by those set relationships we just talked about, T and I mostly. But over time, as these rules are applied again and again, really complex global patterns start to form. The algorithm itself is like the engine driving this iterative process.
Okay, wait, so the complexity isn't necessarily programmed in from the start, it just happens.
Right.
From repeating simple steps over and over.
That's the core idea. Exactly. The algorithm might be programmed simply to generate musical material where, say, the current note or chord must belong to a set that's related to the previous set by a specific defined operation. Think of it almost like a chain reaction. The composer sets the initial conditions and the rule. For instance, a really specific rule might be the next chord generated must be the T4 inversion transposed up by 4 semitones of the last chord played.
Ah, okay. A very precise local instruction.
Very precise. And the outcome is the key. This continuous, iterative, rule-based transformation creates these soundscapes. They feel logically coherent because fundamentally they are following these strict rules, yet they're constantly evolving, dynamic, sometimes even surprising. The complexity truly emerges. It doesn't come from writing super complex initial code, but from the relentless, systematic application of those simple set theory rules across the whole piece.
Okay, that makes sense. It's fascinating. So what does this really unlock for a composer? Why go down this logical, sometimes abstract route instead of, traditional harmony and melody based on intuition? What are the actual benefits here?
Well, this mathematical approach solves quite a few problems that composers were grappling with, especially in 20th century non-tonal music. There are several key benefits. First and foremost is structural coherence. Set theory gives you a powerful method to impose this really deep structural logic onto music that doesn't have a traditional tonal center to anchor it. Because every element, every chord, every melodic fragment can be derived from a core set of rules and transformations. Even really complex, long pieces can maintain this palpable sense of internal unity. Everything feels connected.
But doesn't that rigidity, that transparent logic, risk making the music predictable or, again, monotonous?
That's a fair question, and it brings us to the second benefit, exploration of new sonic spaces. By deliberately breaking free from the gravitational pull of traditional harmony, the need for chords to resolve in certain ways. Set theory lets composers access and really explore combinations of pitches and rhythms that were just inaccessible before. It literally opens up this vast, complex auditory palette. New sounds, new textures, new densities that the old system just couldn't produce systematically.
Some more sonic options. What else?
Third, it offers unprecedented control over tension and release. This is really subtle but powerful. Composers can use the relationships between sets to very precisely adjust the perceived dissonance or consonance. By controlling how closely related sequential sets are, for instance, moving smoothly between sets that are just simple transpositions versus jumping to a set that's very distantly related, maybe through multiple inversions and transpositions, they can finally tune the feeling of tension and stability. It's much more nuanced than just major versus minor.
Okay, fine-grained control over dissonance. That's interesting. And I guess there's a modern angle, too, with technology.
Absolutely. Which leads to the fourth benefit. Efficiency in generation.
Yes.
It's huge today. When you pair set theory's logical framework with algorithms, it lets composers generate vast amounts of musically informed material really quickly. The composer defines the underlying rules, the set relationships, the transformations, and then the algorithm can execute the complex calculations needed to produce thousands, even millions of notes that all adhere to that logic.
Right.
This is incredibly valuable for creating large-scale, detailed sonic environments without the, frankly, immense manual labor of plotting out every single event by hand.
That really is quite a journey we've taken then. From just the abstract idea of a pitch class like C is 0, through these relatively simple math operations like T and I, all the way to generating these huge, controlled, logically complex soundscapes. It really does show that music composition, at least when seen through this particular lens of set theory, it reveals itself to be as much about, well, architecture and logic as it is about pure feeling or emotional expression.
Absolutely. And if we step back and look at the bigger picture here, the really core idea is seeing how complex, sometimes quite beautiful patterns can emerge when you just bring simple mathematics to life as sound. Which I think raises a really interesting question for you, the listener, to ponder. If a profound musical experience can be derived, at least in part, entirely from the iterative execution of simple, defined logic, what does that suggest about the very nature of artistic creativity itself? And maybe, what does it suggest about the role of the human artist in a world where complexity can emerge seemingly on its own? Something to think about.